Hi, and welcome to Inside Tacoma. I'm Steve Kirby, and today my guest is Tacoma Government Relations Officer Randall Lewis. So things are a little reversed from how you normally do things on this show. You are retiring after 28 years with the City of Tacoma as the city's Government Relations Officer and host of Inside Tacoma. So let me ask you, what changes have you seen in the city during that time, other than the fact that I haven't been here in 19 years?
Yeah, you came and went and came back, as I recall, and then left again. Well, I think you have to look at some of the stuff that happened in South Tacoma. The schools, for example, that you and I went to, they tore every one of them down.
Yeah.
and moved them around. Gray's where Mount Tacoma used to be, and Mount Tacoma is almost in Lakewood. I guess that's change. I always hated the old Mount Tacoma anyway because it was swampy and wet, and you got soaked walking between classes because some crazy person thought, hey, let's build them like California. Because in the wintertime here, it's just always nice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But South Tacoma has also changed a lot. There was no Tacoma Mall back in the days when you and I were growing up there. That's certainly been an important part of Tacoma's economic growth over the last few years. There's been a lot of change in who represents Tacoma. People like you and others who look like you and I. Now there's a lot of women who represent Tacoma, women of color and people of color who represent Tacoma in various offices, city council, legislative, state, and federal. That's all different. As much as I have all these great fond memories of growing up in South Tacoma, and nobody will ever take that away from me, I'm delighted one of my daughters and her husband just bought a house in South Tacoma, not too far from where we grew up. It's a great place, but I'm really proud of the growth and change that Tacoma has experienced in the last 40 years or so.
That's great. So how many shows do you think that you've taped during that time? And who are what are some of the more memorable ones? I'm sure that the ones with me probably come to mind right away.
Right, because of you and I knowing each other as long as we have a different way of communicating than I do with some folks. I'm a little less formal with you. There's no getting around that. I think there's probably close to 500 shows because we do 2 a month for however many years that is that we've been here, and so that's close to 500. Other guests that I thought were really good. Well, we've had a few governors. Gary Locke's been here, Chris Gregoire, and Jay Inslee not too long ago was here before he decided to run for president. And so those are always great when a governor can come in. And a few Congress people. Adam Smith was always a challenging interview when he came in. I don't know how well you know Adam, former legislator as well, but he doesn't suffer stupid questions well. And so he'll just actually take over the question and finish it himself and then answer it. But that's, I think, an impressive talent that he's got.
Maybe I'll try that.
You can try to see if you get away with it. And then also, not too long ago, we had the Lieutenant Governor here, Cyrus Habib, has been here. And he's a very interesting person, has a great personal story to tell, and a good TV personality on his own.
Remarkable guy, really.
Yeah, truly is. And then previous lieutenant governors, Brad Owen, because he's a Tacoma guy, grew up here, went to Lincoln High School, and has this rock band. And he'd been on a few times to talk about his rock band, and as well as lieutenant governor stuff.
Yeah, you got to throw that in.
Yeah,
sure. So, all right. Well, okay. I guess it's we've had our fun. As you and I literally grew up together, and we've known each other since like kindergarten, first grade at Edison Elementary, which, by the way, also got torn down into a pile of rubble and moved. So we've been through all of that together, and gosh, I remember. I do remember when you first came back to Tacoma after going to college and getting your degree in communications and going to work at KTNT Radio.
Yes.
always was really comfortable. You know, you never know how that's going to turn out. You know, it's like this. I had no idea how this was going to turn out. I've always felt like I had a better face for radio than you're doing your TV show with you. So I was always real comfortable, you know, doing radio with you. And then, of course, your time basically lobbying on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. I got to be there for a lot of that, and that was really helpful, you know, to me, just because I had somebody in the Chamber of Commerce that I felt like, you know, understood who I was and where I came from and all that. So, I mean, that's the thing that I recall, you know, from our earliest days. And then, of course, the rest we've just done over and over and over, and it's just been like, it's just a no-brainer. You come into my office in Olympia, Crystal knows all about you, and it just works out.
Yep, it does. Well, and the funny thing about the chamber job is that I'd been the reporter for City Hall, covered City Hall for a period of time, both at KTNT and then later as a stringer for another station. And I had this reputation that the Democrats, who generally are the people who've been in charge of Tacoma and Pierce County government over the years and legislative seats. And when I got hired by the chamber, I was interested in the job because they said, well, you have this reputation. I mean, the Democrats talk to you, and the Republicans like you too, because you just have this reputation of being a fair reporter who covers things, you know, and quotes people accurately. And I said, well, most reporters quote people accurately, but thank you for the compliment. But the chamber at that time had been perceived as largely a very partisan organization, and the Democratic people who ran things in local government didn't really listen to it. And so I think I got hired is because I had this access to you and other folks who actually were in decision-making positions, and the chamber wanted some influence. And so it was always been good to be perceived as, you know, nonpartisan, which I've tried really hard to do over the years because, you know, things change. Sometimes Republicans are in ascendancy in Olympia, and other times the Democrats are. And so it's always good to be that way, but have access to folks like you. And just because we had this history, you help with access to other Democrats who I maybe didn't know as well. So, you know, it's worked out, I think, positively for both of us over our careers here.
Yep. Well, and you know, I have the same background, really. I mean, I get criticized. You know, I get my Democratic credentials called into question all the time. You know, because you know, I chair the Business and Financial Services Committee, and I serve on Commerce and Gaming, and so, you know, I am perceived as a, you know, sort of a business-oriented Democrat. There is such a thing, and you know, sometimes depending on what's going on within the dynamics of the party at any given point in time, any of the decades, you know, that have gone by, you either fit in well and sometimes you don't. And so I've learned to live with that too. I totally get how that works, but I can tell you that you know, that's a really good way to go to maintain the respect of people on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the rotunda, and it's worked for me, and it's worked for you as well. So, you know, maybe something about the way we were brought up in South Tacoma had something to do with that.
That could be those old South Tacoma, you know, blue collar roots and values that is part of the history of that community. So yeah, it could well be. I'm proud to say that may be part of why I am the way I am. So, because I tell people all the time that I grew up in South Tacoma, not just Tacoma, but, you know, South Tacoma. I don't live there now and haven't for some time, but it is the place I'm from, and I drive by the houses that we both grew up in on Oak Street and look at them all the time and look whether approvingly or disapprovingly at the changes that people have made to them.
The people that bought my house did a really nice job.
Oh, okay.
Just in case they're watching.
Oh. Okay. So it's been, this is kind of intriguing, the little flip we did here with you interviewing me.
I don't know if you should, just total surprise.
Yes, it was.
To you.
Yes.
I was in on it. And, you know, you and I had our post-session wrap up breakfast this morning. We do every year,
Right.
And I didn't spill the beans. I thought I was real proud of myself when I walked in, and you were, all surprised.
Yes, I really was, and that you could keep a secret that long is truly impressive, Steve.
Sure. I've got secrets for decades still inside my head that have not made their way out my lips, and I won't tell a lot of them until a few more people die.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. I mean, I regard the 2019 legislative session, my last one for the city of Tacoma, as a highly successful one. A lot of the stuff that was on the city council's adopted agenda, we were able to get through, and you helped with a great deal of that. But how do you feel about overall the session this year? I mean, there's certainly criticism that the legislature raised lots of taxes that may or may not have been needed, depending on how you perceive the surplus that existed. But I think legislators generally feel better about passing stuff than not passing stuff. And it seemed like a lot of good policy passed this year, too.
It really did. And I guess, gosh, where to start, because we covered a lot of ground. First of all, I've pushed back on whether or not we truly did have a surplus. It is true that there was more revenue for this cycle than there was the previous cycle, but all of that revenue had been earmarked the previous session as a part of the McCleary compromise that we did with both parties in agreement. We basically said we're going to do this and this and this and this regarding McCleary with money that we anticipated would come in during this budget cycle. So that's really a misnomer that, oh gosh, they had billions of dollars. No, we didn't, and they know it. But you kind of have to. It's just what you have to do, and everybody's doing what they have to do. Our district, or I should say my district, but the district that you grew up in. And really, middle-class people really are kind of taxed out. What happens is, we like to say that, if the richest people in the world who live here in this state, and some of them do, paid their fair share of taxes, that we probably wouldn't have a lot of these problems. And so the problem that we've had in the past is, we try to, come up with ways to improve that, fix it so that, rich people pay their fair share of taxes. But we keep taking a swing at them and hitting the middle class right in the nose, and that has happened year after year after year. And in my mind this year, I was just not, my people are paying all they can pay. We've done everything that you can do to tax working class people. So my goal as we put together the revenue package to do some of the things that we did was to try to ensure that the people who live in my district are not affected by any of them.
Really?
So, and truly, I think we really got it. That was my benchmark, because if it was my benchmark, it would work statewide, to at least to some extent, and it did. Now, if you own a bank that makes more than $1 billion a year in net profits, you got a tax increase. Not anywhere near as the tax cut that you got from, the federal government, so it's not like you're going to have to shut down and go away. That's not going to happen. If you sell your house for more than $1.5 million, you got a tax increase. The real estate excise tax actually goes up. Now, if you sell your house for less than $500,000, which is almost every home sale in my district,
Right.
You actually got a tax decrease. And then everything in between, it just stayed the same. So the idea was to work around working class people and, try to if there are going to be increases, apply them to people who truly can and maybe should afford them. Now, the one place where there may be a slight difference in that thinking is if you're a highly paid professional like a lawyer or an accountant, or like a CPA or an architect or something like that, your B&O tax did go up 0.3%. And I did have a friend of mine who is a fairly successful lawyer come to my office, and he said, "Yeah, gosh, that's just going to get passed on." And I said, "What do you charge? About $400 an hour?" Well, eventually got to yeah. And I said, "So if you're going to pass that along, you're going to change that then to $401.60. Am I right? So you're going to start charging $401.60 an hour?" Well, probably not, And so that's the exception. But there are actual thresholds that people have to meet before those things kick in. But the fact of the matter is, there may be very few people in my district who will pay that 0.3% increase on their B&O tax. So other than that, a lot of that is just, baloney. Now, I've had people come to me and say, "How come you raise my taxes?" And I've asked them those questions. Do you own a bank? Do you, well, no. I said, "Well, what are you, talking to me about? You're not going to have to pay any of that." "Oh, okay." And then they walk off and everybody's happy.
They're happy.
Yeah.
All of that also seems like it was part of this. We always hear about Washington's tax code. It's a 19th century tax code in the 21st century, and it's based on consumption. It's not based on information, and it's really regressive because the poor pay a larger share than the rich do. Sounds like you actually also began to maybe address that, even though that may not have been the goal. Is to make the system more progressive overall. It sounds like you may have actually pushed it in that direction.
Yeah, and that's been the goal all along. And I'm, pleased that this time it actually worked out that way. And we're gonna keep heading in that direction. What happens is the other side likes to message these things in a way that makes them sound terrible. So I'm hearing grumblings about, well, there's let's reverse the $27 billion in tax increases that they did. And the fact of the matter is, that's just not true. Literally not true. What that is there's a little quirk in a previous initiative that allows for the Office of Financial Management to send out these updates. So this tax is going to generate so much revenue over 10 years. So yeah, over 10 years, it'll be $27 billion. The entire, I haven't done the math, but it's a $50 billion budget. What's that going to be over 10 years? Oh gosh, that's astronomical. You throw the bums out, but it's a fake way to make things look worse than they really are. Mm-hmm. And again, the goal is for people, who can least afford to pay more taxes will be bypassed. That's the goal. And we're getting there, and I think there are a few more things that we can do, and it can be done.
There was another one that I know only affects 2 corporations in Washington, and it happens to be 2 of the technology companies headquartered here that make certain threshold of money, and the money's earmarked for college seats for computer sciences, because those are the people they need to hire from our Washington colleges and universities. And so they voluntarily went to the legislature and said, please raise our taxes and earmark the money this way, because we really need this.
Sure.
But it's only those 2 companies that will ever pay that, but people also lump that in as part of this big tax increase.
And they did not oppose that particular
Right.
increase, and none of their lobbyists came into my office and says, "Oh, please don't do this." In fact, it's my understanding that one of them actually helped write the.
Yeah, it was Microsoft.
Yeah, so I'm totally comfortable with that, and it is what we did with the increased revenue that really counts. So if you have college-age kids, or if you wanted to go back to school yourself, we put together for the first time in this state a program whereby families with I'm going to do this off the top of my head, but whose household income is like $50,000 a year, or less, there can be free tuition. And then other families who maybe it kind of steps up, there's a few more steps that get reduced tuition. I mean, this is like, that was just, we've needed to try to make college more accessible to people who can least afford it for quite a while, because that really got away from us. So we did that. The problem with the Affordable Care Act has always been that it wasn't always affordable.
Right.
And so that's why it's under attack all over the country. Well, in this state, we made changes to how we do health care coverage, and we have a system now that is going to actually make health care accessible and affordable to more people. And we did that by putting caps on expenses and that sort of thing, and it's all very reasonable. And I mean, that sort of thing is why we do this. And I could just go on and on if I could remember every single thing. It's a $50 billion thing, but that's what that revenue paid for, and so it's well worth it. We have the first long-term care program ever.
I was going to ask you about that one.
I think it's the only one in the country right now,
and it's paid for by a payroll tax deduction.
Right, and you know what? And that's something that's going to catch up to us real quick. I mean, you and I are the ones that are most at risk in the early days, but it's something that not enough people have planned for long-term care, and we need to make something available. I suspect that it's going to happen all over the country. If all goes well, it would be great if the federal government would do some of these things nationwide, and then each state wouldn't have to do this, state by state by state. That's the world we live in now, because, with a divided government in Washington, D.C., we have no choice, but each state has to kind of start, doing these things on their own, which is not good, because you have different rules and, different ways of really accomplishing some of the same things in different states. And that's very difficult for, companies that work in multi-states. So it's just not the best way to do it, but it's what we've all done, and it's what we're doing here in the state of Washington.
Well, let me ask you the extension of that question, because you're right, the states have stepped up when the federal Congress is unable or unwilling to actually pass legislation through both houses that the president will sign. So, yeah. I mean, that we seem to have that fundamental problem. But, sometimes it's actually even, let's take this down a step, because sometimes it's been actions by cities that have pushed the state. In the case of Washington State, and in other states as well, have pushed the state to take the action. And the states sometimes, in some states, they respond by saying, well, we're just going to preempt you. You can't do that anymore, cities, ha ha ha. Washington has largely not done that. There's been grumbling sometimes, but Tacoma was amongst the cities that raised the minimum wage on our own before the state did. And then the voters took care of that. Tacoma acted along with some other cities on marijuana. And then the state got around and fixed it the way it really needed to be fixed. It was a statewide level. Same with marijuana. Same with plastic bags. You didn't quite get the plastic bag ban passed statewide this year, but came close. And I'm sure it'll happen very soon, because that's the way it really needs to be done. But sometimes it's local government, which you're very familiar with, that kind of pokes and prods the state into these actions, and then sometimes maybe hopefully the states will prod the federal government into doing things.
Well, and and then sometimes, and that's a good thing, the fact that we need to allow cities, we need to really fix it so that city governments can operate. We shouldn't be an obstacle to the successful operation of a city government. But one of the challenges we have is kind of from another direction is I'm getting just a little bit frustrated with the courts constantly ordering us to spend money that we don't have. And that has caused a lot of consternation. And I think, frankly, that they're kind of starting to kind of move out of their lane. And hopefully, we've done as much of that as we're going to do. It's not that they're always wrong, but, there's a way to go about doing that without putting the state in financial turmoil. And that just hasn't been a priority for, another branch of government that doesn't have to worry about that, or they think they don't.
Well, we have to leave it there. So this unusual episode of Inside Tacoma, where Steve kind of took control of it there for a few minutes. But anyway, thank you very much for being our guest, and thank you for your service and always being my friend for all these years. I really do appreciate working with you all this time.
Thank you for 28 years of service to the city of Tacoma.
Well, thank you, Steve. And thank you for watching, and please join us next time here on Inside Tacoma.